Rivalry, history, passion, pride. This series explores football's bitterest clashes. This is Football Rivalries. Coming up, the Old Firm. Religion, history and Glaswegian pride at stake. There's nothing in the world quite like Celtic against Rangers. And we're in Holland for De Klassieker. Ajax against FEYENOORD, the artists of Amsterdam against the workers of Rotterdam.
Derby day between the Old Firm was about singing non-stop. The noise and the din that was in both, whether it was Ibrox or Parkhead, was quite unique.
I think the passion was probably the thing that sticks out the most. Blood and guts, and both teams going to go hammering tongs at each other.
You come out of the dressing room and you line up next to each other. And once when you go out, it's a big roar, and it is an explosion. And it is, yeah, for a player, it is fantastic. There's
big atmospheres and there's enormous atmospheres. And the Rangers-Celtic one was always ridiculously noisy.
It's the match they call the Old Firm. Glasgow Rangers versus Glasgow Celtic.
Massive rivalry, but it's great. I mean, that's the type of thing that you want in a city. I mean, there's no sense in having two big clubs in a city and saying that there's not any rivalry. Of course there's rivalry.
It's like the rivalry between Liverpool and Manchester United. It's like the rivalry between Boca Juniors and River Plate, Barcelona, Real Madrid.
Glasgow cannot without the Old Firm. I think if you take Rangers and Celtic away, then I think a lot of people will struggle here.
It's been going on for more than a century, but Celtic against Rangers is still the most eagerly awaited fixture in the Scottish calendar. Over the years, the two clubs have simply dominated Scottish football. Celtic and Rangers between them have won over 90 titles. Beyond the football, it's a rivalry that goes to the very core of society in the west of Scotland, and the rivalry is still as fierce.
Match is always important. Celtic Rangers derby is probably the most famous derby in the world, as you can hear.
Unbelievable. Still the same, still get the same buzz at every game, and I realise that a lot of that, you know, is down to what people might see as hatred between both sides, or the edge that creates. But the edge that creates makes for an unbelievable atmosphere.
You can get intelligent, well-educated men going to the football on a derby day and not seeing any football, just shouting abuse at each other. And it's just, it beggars belief, some of the stuff that goes on.
It means everything. The 60,000 people up in here will be just praying that we beat these people today for no other reason than they are the Rangers. That's how important it is.
There's no way you can view the Celtic Rangers fixture simply as a sporting rivalry. It reflects the divisions that have existed in the west of Scotland for many years. Traditionally, Celtic are the Catholic team of Glasgow, and Rangers take their support from the Protestant population. The divide was so deeply ingrained that for 118 years, Rangers had an unwritten rule that they would never sign a Catholic player. It's a football rivalry that reflects the historical circumstances that have shaped it, and the passions that now surround the Old Firm have their roots in Northern Ireland, a province that suffered terribly from the consequences of religious divisions. The overspill from the Irish population was felt significantly in Glasgow.
Celtic are essentially an Irish club playing in Scotland. I mean, they were founded by Irish people, or people of very recent Irish descent, in the 1880s. And the original purpose of Celtic was to raise money for charitable purposes, to feed the poor children.
The man credited more than anyone with Celtic's foundation is brother Wilfred, who practised in the east of Glasgow. Back then it was a sporting association to help the Irish community. Little did he know that St Mary's would give birth to one of the giants of European football.
Celtic and the people involved in Celtic had a very big decision to take at that time, which was either to be a Catholic, Irish, exclusivist club, or else to say, no, we're a Scottish club and we are open to all, and that is the way we want to develop. And very fortuitously they decided on the latter course. So Celtic have always been Irish, and in my view proudly Irish in their origins and connections, but they have never been an exclusivist Catholic Irish club.
The ideal of non-exclusivity was not embraced by the founders of Rangers, who developed as a Protestant club run by Protestants. As the years went by, it became enshrined in Rangers' culture that they would never sign a Catholic player. A few did manage to slip through the net, but effectively there was a bar on Catholics at Rangers. It was a policy that would resonate around the Glasgow rivalry for many years to come.
Once you have that kind of division, maybe it's inevitable that it polarises and hardens. And in Glasgow in the early part of the 20th century, there was another big influx of immigration, which was shipyard workers from the Protestant north of Ireland. So the more they attached themselves to football clubs, then the more these football clubs became identified with that kind of division. And they brought with them the songs and in some cases the prejudices, which certainly intensified the rivalry and the passions for good and very often for ill.
So with such deep-seated differences, is it any wonder that passions have often run so high?
Apart from the very obvious footballing rivalries, there's the religious aspect, which is in many ways not very healthy or helpful.
The problem is that when it goes into other attitudes, from a religious background, then I wish to heck it had never happened. Rivalry's terrific as long as it's healthy. When it becomes unhealthy, then I don't think it does anything for the place.
You're aware of it, and it was never something I was completely comfortable with. It was it wasn't nice. There was, I was actually married to a Catholic girl, and it was not something I was ever brought up with. It wasn't. I was from Edinburgh, and in the west of Scotland, that's a bigger deal. In Edinburgh, it wasn't an issue.
Some of the isolated but negative incidents have included a crowd invasion after the 1980 Cup final, and attempts in 1952 to ban Celtic from flying the Irish flag, which ultimately failed. And after fans invaded the pitch in Barcelona, Rangers manager Willie Waddle addressed the stadium from the centre circle at Ibrox, saying that he would be willing to sign a Catholic for Rangers. But no Catholics arrived during Waddle's era. The feeling was that enough was enough, and the club started a concerted effort to tackle the sectarianism head-on.
Regrettably, it's part of Scottish society, but you have to keep battling away to drive it down. And I think over the last few years, there's definitely been massive progress made that way. A lot of sectarian singing has been all but drowned out now at Ibrox and at Parkhead.
They've made great strides together to try and make sure that it's about supporting your club and giving the best for your club only.
There's so many joint initiatives between the teams to beat the sectarianism and the prejudices that are there. If you look back in the 80s when there were riots at games and various things at cup finals, etc., you would have to say then it wasn't healthy. But I think over the last 2 decades, both clubs have made massive efforts to progress, with Fergus McCann's Boys Against Bigotry, the Rangers programme Pride Over Prejudice, which I think have made, big steps towards zoning out the sectarianism and the bigotry in the home grounds.
It exists and it has to be addressed. And if football is the repository for these attitudes, then football has a responsibility to make clear that it does no truck with them.
So how much effect has all the community work had? Feelings have changed since an Old Firm match in 1986.
It's a game, but to other folk it's 90 minutes of pure bigotry. So it comes to, no, it's down to religion right through.
As far as I'm concerned, the Celtic Rangers game it's inbred. If you're a glass region, but it's either one or the other.
And while sectarian elements still lurk in Glasgow, clearly the situation has calmed down.
I think when it first started, you know, there was a lot of rivalry regarding the kind of sectarianism and things like that, but I think they're trying to kind of whittle that away, and obviously it's getting a bit better for that. I used to think years ago there used to be 300 or 400 people were arrested at these games, but you don't find that now.
Even all the Celtic fans won't be sectarian based at all, like, you know. Just good fans, a bit of crack, a bit of banter, even with the Rangers ones now, like walking down the road, it's good, it's all a bit of fun.
The 7th of April 1986 turned out to be a pivotal moment for Rangers, both on and off the pitch. Graham Souness walked into Rangers from Sampdoria in Italy. He'd enjoyed phenomenal success with Liverpool before agreeing to becoming the player-manager at Ibrox. But at that time, Rangers fans could be hard to please.
He's an unknown quantity as a manager. He's a rare player. But we're not caring about that, as long as he doesn't sign Catholic.
Well, as long as a Rangers player goes onto the park and plays in a blue shirt and plays for a Rangers team, I don't care who he signs.
We've got our traditions at Ibrox, and we don't want to see them broke for the sake of one man. Souness or no.
Souness, though, had always been his own man, and he was going to manage Rangers in his own way.
The very first question I'm asked when I'm revealed as a new manager at the press conference was, would you sign a Catholic? And I said, how can I marry one and go home to one every night but not work with one? So I think previous managers had answered it in a similar way, that they would always sign, of course they would sign a Catholic, and never ever did.
But Souness was true to his word. Not only did he sign a Roman Catholic, but he signed Mo Johnston, a Catholic who'd actually played for Celtic. Johnston was returning to Scotland after a spell in France with Nantes. He'd been linked with a return to Celtic, but the deal broke down, which is when Souness stepped in.
We ended up signing Maurice Johnson, not for any other reason than he was a very, very good football player that we felt would improve our lot. And he was very brave to do it. And I think Rangers have never looked back since we made that brave move.
The signing, needless to say, was earth-shattering Old Firm news. Once again, the football fans of the city were divided, but at least some were seeing the way forward.
It's up to the Rangers supporters to welcome the guy when he comes, when he goes on, and cheer him on, you know, and forget about all the religious barriers. And, you know, say, right, Maurice Johnston's a Rangers player, and that's the most important thing. Let's give the guy a chance.
He's a good player, but the Catholic.
I never thought they'd sign a Catholic, especially the one that did sign it, you know. Just unbelievable.
Should have been done years and years ago, because, you know, I mean, religion is religion, football is football.
Maurice, quite happy to be a Ranger? Yep. Everything good for you?
From our part, or from my part, and the club's part, they knew it had to be done. But it wasn't. We didn't target Maurice simply because it would break that 118 years of not signing a Catholic. We did it because it was the right thing for football reasons.
Those football reasons were quite straightforward and practical. The old policy meant that Catholics couldn't play for Rangers, no matter how good they were.
If there was two kids that were the top players in Glasgow, and one was Catholic and one was Protestant, Celtic only had to work on the one who was Protestant, because they knew the Catholic one wouldn't be going to Rangers. That one was in the bag, but the Protestant one was one that they could devote time to persuade him to come to Celtic. For the future well-being, for the growth of Rangers, it had to be done. You know, religion, colour or creed should never come into it. They should be judged on what they do on a football pitch, not colour of skin or what church they go to or don't go to.
This was a situation Celtic's legendary Jock Stein had used to his advantage as early as the 1960s.
Like many of the major figures in Celtic's history, Stein was not a Catholic and was not did not have that whole Irish connection. Stein had a great line, you know, that if he had a choice between a Catholic and a Protestant player, he would always choose the Protestant because he knew that Rangers, who did have a sectarian employment policy, could not sign the Catholic.
In 1967, Stein led Celtic to become the first British team to win the European Cup. Amazingly, none of the side that beat Inter Milan 2-1 in Lisbon came from more than 30 miles away from Glasgow. One of them was Stein's captain and leader, Billy McNeill.
We just wanted to win it. We wanted to win it for ourselves, we wanted to win it for the club, we wanted to win it for the supporters. And it was something that was great.
It was more than just about football. I mean, the whole thing was the triumph of a community that, you know, had always felt its backs to have been a bit to the wall, always felt itself to have been a bit looked down on, always had regarded this football club as a sort of symbol of what it was capable of achieving, all of these things, you know, and suddenly they were the best in Europe.
Celtic did manage to reach the final again, but lost to Feyenoord in 1970. 2 years later, with the inspirational captain John Gregg, Rangers corrected the balance of power in Scotland by taking the European Cup Winners' Cup in Barcelona.
I think at the time it was great. A city with just slightly less than 1 million of a population had two teams that had won European trophies, which was exceptional because I don't think any other country of our size has had that type of success.
The rivalry, though, was as fierce as ever. Between 1966 and 1974, Celtic obliterated Rangers with an unprecedented 9 Scottish First Division titles in a row.
It was massive because people have said to me often that it must have been easy after winning a couple to win it. It was harder. Nothing was ever easy. You had to keep your concentration all the time. You were a big challenge to everybody else. They tried to knock you off your pedestal. And it was demanding because you knew you were expected to do something good all the time. Big Jock was absolutely marvellous as a manager, of course.
But Rangers were to have their successful era too. Between 1989 and 1997, under Graham Souness and Walter Smith, Rangers equalled Celtic's famous 9 in a row.
Well, I think it's a tremendous achievement. There's been a great deal of pressure on it. I've said on many occasions that as we were going along the road, you came to admire Celtic's feat of winning 9 championships more and more as each season went on.
Before I won, contributed to Rangers equalling that record with Walter after me. So that was a fantastic achievement. Any club to win 9 championships is outrageous in the modern game.
When Jock Stein's team won the 9 for Celtic, it was said in modern football it couldn't happen again. But you have to look at the teams that Rangers constructed then on a backbone of British players with special foreigners like Laudrup and Gascoigne. And that was a special era for Rangers that they may never get back to.
And in the true spirit of the rivalry, Celtic were hoping that Rangers wouldn't do it.
I've got to be perfectly honest with you, I was hoping that they wouldn't get to 9 in a row, just like every other Celtic fan, because it was tarnishing our achievements. But when I think about it now, possibly it was quite realistic and satisfactory that they got to 9 and didn't go any further than that. That suited us because our record wasn't beaten, and probably suited them as well because they had done something likewise.
The balance of power was ever shifting, and the arrival of Martin O'Neill swung things back Celtic's way.
He knew what the old firm games meant. He was incredibly passionate about them. He'd grown up a Celtic fan in Ireland, and he certainly relished those fixtures and certainly got caught up in them.
Then, under Alex McLeish, Rangers pulled off 2 final day title victories. 2005 came down to the wire, and the direction of the trophy was literally in the balance.
Wasn't aware of it at the time, but we knew that the helicopter was in the air, hovering between the two towns of Edinburgh and Motherwell. That was probably the biggest spine tingler that I've experienced in my entire life, when the Rangers fans roared in approval of Motherwell's equaliser. We'd all agree that it was one of the most spectacular days ever in Rangers history. The commentator's famous line of the helicopter is changing direction, I think, will go down in folklore.
It's the build-up to another Old Firm derby. How would Celtic manager Gordon Strachan be motivating his team?
This is Celtic versus Rangers.
Yeah.
I don't think there'll be any problem. The world's watching you. I don't think there's a problem. There's no problem. It takes a life of its own. This, forget whatever tournament you're playing on, it just takes a life of its own. You just have to win. You've got to let yourselves and the fans to enjoy the madness, because you create the madness and they enjoy the madness. So we've got to stay above the madness, which is fine.
Whether it was madness, nervousness, even sickness, however it affected you, the big day had arrived.
It's all about pride, basically. I think it's the #1 derby in the world. They say there's bigger ones, but I don't think there's any bigger. You always want to put one out your closest neighbour, as they say.
My stomach is in turmoil just with the nerves going up in here. The 3 points don't matter. We're going to win the league anyway, but we have to beat the Rangers. Have to.
I think Rangers might get something on Sunday, simply because I think Walter Smith will let his team know that defeat is not an option, and that possibly their quest for second means more to them than Celtic simply ticking down the time to when they win the title. So it wouldn't surprise me to sit on the fence and go for a draw and say that Rangers might get a point on it.
60,000 people inside Parkhead and many times more around Glasgow, totally chance-fixed. Celtic, soon to be champions on this occasion, had good reason to be confident. Mind you, the Rangers fans were in great voice too. And just like the song, Rangers did score. Hugo Ehihog giving them an unlikely victory at Parkhead.
Absolutely magic. The best result in the world. See, when I go into work tomorrow, I go into work and I'm getting them dogs abuse, whereas if they get beat today, I'm getting dogs abuse. That's what it's all about. And it's all about your team and your courage and everything about it. Everything's mad, but it's brilliant. And I'm glad we done them today.
The hope in Glasgow is that this is what the Old Firm is all about. An intense rivalry, but with humour and without the negativity. Where going to work and bragging to your colleagues means everything. Just in fact, like so many other football rivalries the world over.
I've never had any serious problems with Rangers fans. Sure that there's barter. It wouldn't be football and it wouldn't be Glasgow without that type of thing.
Football is such an important thing in the people's life. They talk about it the whole week. They go to the stadium and they want to show that they support the team. It's a social thing, and here as well, Rangers and Celtic, they belong to Glasgow. It is so important that the Old Firm is there in a good way, you know, with the passion, with the singing, with the fans supporting their team, and as long as you can control it.
In time, the tensions that have blighted Glasgow and the west of Scotland may well now fade forever. But hopefully the passions that surround the Glasgow derby will remain intact, whether the year belongs to Rangers or to Celtic.
It doesn't hurt that Celtic have been dominant in the last couple of years, but nothing lasts forever. Things go in a cycle, and I'm sure next year Rangers will be trying even harder to correct that balance. Walter will do a good job there, and I'd expect him to put a far bigger challenge up next year.
Whoever is dominant, you can be sure this rivalry will lose none of its edge. Celtic against Rangers. The old firm goes on.
I'm still looking for Rangers to win the derby games. Yeah. Well, it's been the last couple of years have not been so great, but overall Rangers are still winning more championships than Celtic. So as long as it stays like that, I'll be happy.
The rival between Feyenoord and Ajax is amazing.
And Ajax Feyenoord and Feyenoord Ajax is something special, and it's a motivation for every player to be part of it.
Normally the people are pretty laid back in Holland, very down to earth. But with this match it's just something different. The people talk about it the whole week, they make fun on their work, at home, jokes, The match is sold out, of course, already for weeks.
Feyenoord is a religion, really. It's every time when you're going out bed, you think about Feyenoord. It's maybe your wife, your second wife, your second home.
Feyenoord Ajax is the game of the year. Like Celtic and Glasgow Rangers, it is the game.
These days, the passion for the match they call de Klassieker in Holland is often in danger of spilling into chaos. A logistical triumph for the Dutch police on this occasion meant the ultras of both sides were kept apart, and the majority of decent fans could concentrate on the match itself. And just as well, they could come in peace, as this was the game of the year at the Amsterdam Arena. Ajax against Feyenoord. De Klassieker.
It's always a little bit of war between the two clubs.
This is Amsterdam, you're in our place.
I think that the supporters from Feyenoord and Ajax only look at these two games.
Two big cities, Amsterdam, Rotterdam, so they are always in competition with this kind of games.
This Feyenoord's mean to me. You know what I mean now? And this is to me my city.
So many emotions surround this one fixture. Much of Holland's youth devoted to the love of one club and the denigration of the rival. Why the passion, the deep-rooted antipathy? It's all about two cities in the Netherlands, Rotterdam and Amsterdam, more famous for its diversity and tolerance than for any kind of football hooliganism.
Amsterdam is the capital of Holland. I think some people in Rotterdam and maybe other people in the country too think that people from Amsterdam are a bit superior. They want to be superior, they have a big mouth. They think that if you come from Amsterdam, you're the boss in Holland.
So much for the picture postcards, but there's more to this city than canals and coffee bars. It's also home to another famous Amsterdam institution, total football. This is De Meer, where those famous Ajax sides played. Johan Cruyff lived on the estate over the road. Here some of Ajax's famous names like Marco van Basten, Edgar Davids and Ronald Koeman all started their careers. Also a young midfielder called Frank Rijkaard.
Rijkaard steeds meer voorin. Prima schot en wat een mooie goal zeg. Oh!
Yeah, it left a wonderful impression. I think it was a wonderful moment, but getting to know really important football players with a lot of quality, that's like an inspiration.
But there was one star who outshone them all.
The biggest pride probably which you felt inside
is when you're very young, you grew up at the street playing the game all the time, and probably the first time I've played in the Ajax stadium, I don't remember even the game, but just going out there and play your first game, I think that's the most satisfactory you can ever imagine.
Johan Cruyff was the biggest star in the generation that put Dutch football on the map back in the 70s. And the success of both clubs in that era kick-started the rivalry.
I think the rivalry became particularly strong, let's say beginning in the 70s. Because at that time, arguably, you had the best two teams in the world. Feyenoord was world champion in '71, the first Dutch team ever, first to win the European Cup and then become world champion. And Ajax, of course, did it Feyenoord in 1970 and Ajax in 3 consecutive years after that. Ajax, of course, you had these players, Cruyff and Neeskens and Blankenburg and Krol. They all had long hair. They had the rebel look. As if rock and roll had gone onto the pitch.
Ajax always had the special players who drew the attention of from all over the world, and it was flashy. It was maybe a little bit more like glamour, and it was something different.
The Ajax sides of the time brought a new phrase into the lexicon of the game: total football. A fluid system of mesmeric and interchangeable football evolved in Amsterdam. It made Ajax the envy of Europe. Johnny Rep was one of the stars of Holland and Ajax.
Ajax in the 70s and 80s were a world-class team. Just like that great Dutch side in 1974. You just can't compare that period with nowadays.
Rotterdam isn't even 100 kilometres from Amsterdam, but it might as well be a world apart. Heavily bombed during the Nazi blitzkrieg of the Second World War, the Rotterdammers rebuilt their city. Their people have one saying that sums up this rivalry: while Amsterdam dreams, Rotterdam works. More than anything else, Feyenoord Ajax is a city rivalry.
Amsterdam is the capital, Rotterdam is the harbour, one of the biggest harbour. And I think that's the main thing. Amsterdam a little bit, they think we are the best, we are this. In Rotterdam we have to do it from the workers, tough guys, and that's the first difference between those clubs.
They're always competing. When they're building a new stadium, Rotterdammers have a bigger stadium, always competing against each other.
Amsterdam, it's more the cultural city. Here are the artists, the actors, that's where the people in Amsterdam, they live here. And in Amsterdam is more artistic. So the players from Amsterdam, from Ajax, they play like artists. That's a big difference.
The people from Rotterdam think the people from Amsterdam are arrogant. Everything is bigger, everything is better. They think, and we think the other side. Rotterdam, the people from Rotterdam are better, are not so arrogant, always giving a hand to each other. But in Amsterdam, they're always alone. Yeah, they are arrogant people.
The Feyenoord district of Rotterdam is just a stone's throw from their De Kuip stadium. Here the tension is building. It's Thursday morning of a derby week, and the biggest match of the year is fast approaching. Feyenoord hero Benny Wijnstekers knows all about De Klassieker.
It's very special. Every game is a good game, is a special game. But those games we play in Amsterdam or here in our own stadium, then it's so strange. Before the games, the whole week, the newspapers, the media is talking about the game. It's something special, so special because we want to say something about Amsterdam, they want to say about us, and so on. It goes on in the newspaper before the games.
A Feyenoord fanatic as a boy, Wijnstekers went on to play over 350 games for the club. He captained them and his country, Holland, too. A rock-solid defender in the no-nonsense Rotterdam mould. A Feyenoord hero.
Tot een hoekschop is geraakt. Brandsman in de lucht. Wijnstekers knalt goed. Ja, een doelpunt. Een schitterende goal. Een schitterende goal van Benny Wijnstekers.
Benny was part of the 1970 team that won the European Cup for Feyenoord, the first team in Holland to do so. He now works at the club promoting youth in his own programme, Hand in Hand. If anyone's blood runs red and white, it's his.
My father was a real Feyenoord supporter. Yeah, he took me away, take me with to the club, to the stadium. Then you're thinking Feyenoord, you're thinking Rotterdam. So there's a start. Maybe after when you playing by yourself in the first team, then it's something difficult, because when we play out, not only the derbies when you play out, you see the crowd is so fantastic. Feyenoord is the best crowd of, I think, perhaps for all Europe, I think. But normally, when you're playing here in the stadium, I think we play with 30 men, because they are so important. For 12 men, they're so important for us.
They call that Feyenoord support Het Legion, the Legion, passionate support provided by those such as Joep Verschoren.
When you are a Feyenoord supporter, you cannot be Feyenoord supporter when you are 20. You be born with the heart of Feyenoord. You have in your veins you have red and white blood. When you see the games here, we are not playing very well now. We have a bad team. It's not so good. But every time they are sitting here 30, 40,000 people. When you do the same in Amsterdam, you're playing not bad as Amsterdam's team. Then you not got so many people, maybe 15,000. Wrong or bad, always stands behind your club.
The Amsterdam crowd is more, yeah, okay, work hard, that's normal, but show something extra, show something different.
On the other side of the Netherlands, Ajax too were preparing for the derby. Former legend Edgar Davids was back with the club, hoping to make his return against Feyenoord. With the match just 2 days away, expectations were growing among players, fans and the media of Amsterdam.
There are loads of cameras today because well, we have the big clash, Ajax Feyenoord, and well, they come all from all over Holland now. Normally we have 3-4 camera teams, but now we have 1, 2, 3, 4, about 7. Wat is zijn status nu? Wat is zijn? Kun je uitleggen wat de stand van zaken is?
After the press conference, it was back to the cutting room. But this is Ajax TV, where journalistic balance might just be lost.
The Ajax fans don't want to talk about Feyenoord. They say F for Feyenoord. They never say Feyenoord. They always say F. Or the kakkerlakken. The kakkerlakken is cockroaches. So they talk about kakkerlakken or F, but never the whole word Feyenoord. And on the other side, the Feyenoord fans always say Neuzen, the noses, because the Jews, and Ajax is still called a Jewish club, have noses. They have big noses, like me.
Like Feyenoord, Ajax's support will never take De Klassiker lightly. And as match day approaches, they're just as desperate for victory, if perhaps a little surer of their superiority.
Win, it's always party. And then I don't know until what hour, you know, depends on how big the party will be. If we lose, it will be not that big of a problem if you look at the ranking, but I will be sick to the bone, actually, yeah. But there will be no sickness because we will win, I'm certain.
Overwhelmingly, the feeling at Ajax is that they are the best. Rotterdammers may say arrogant, but history books will back up the Ajax fans' boasting.
If you look back into history, Ajax has a much better history than Feyenoord. They won more cups, European cups 4 times, Feyenoord only 1. They won the World Cup once, Feyenoord once. Okay, so that's equal. But championships, the last years, Ajax was much more champion than Feyenoord. If you compare the wins overall, Ajax won with 8-2 in 1983. Ajax won with 6-0, Ajax won with 5-0, Ajax won this season with 4-0. They're getting close to each other, but still Ajax is better than Feyenoord.
One man who's experienced many a resounding victory over the enemy is Jack Svart. He holds the record number of appearances for the club. The man they still call Mr. Ajax.
I play for Ajax 70 years in the first team. The most games, 603, I think. And I score 228 goals. And that's a lot for an outside right. Mr. Ajax. That's good.
Mr. Ajax played 36 times in De Klassiker, scoring an amazing 19 goals. None more important than a famous match around 50 years ago.
In 1960, both were on the top, the same points, and we must make an extra game. And that was in Amsterdam, and we win 5-1. I never forget it.
What happened?
At halftime, yes, at halftime was 1-0 for Feyenoord.
Yeah.
In the second half we scored 5 goals.
Dan heeft Bijenberg de bal. En dan gaat Hekstroot. Dat is een prachtig doelpunt van Hekstroot.
And I myself, I scored the third goal.
Sjaak Zwart.
And it was the decision. 3-1 and then it was over with Feyenoord.
Dan nog steeds Zwart. Dan gaat Zwart.
And at the same time, I learned my wife. And now I'm 45 years married with the same.
And more happy memories were to come for Mr. Ajax.
Then we win 3 times the European Cup, 1971, 1972, 1973. And that's the team with Cruyff, Keizer, Neeskens, Hulshoff, Zuurbier. It was fantastic. It was... Cruyff was, I think, the best in the world, but all the players in that team were on that place, what they play, fantastic.
When Svart retired at the age of 36, another star was slotting into the Ajax side, Johnny Rep, who got the winner for Ajax's 3rd consecutive European Cup.
Dat was 1-0. I made it 1-0, and that was one of my best moments. But it wasn't a very exciting game for the fans. Actually, it was an extremely disappointing European Cup final. But for me, it was important. I'd scored the only goal.
And apart from everything he won with Ajax, Johnny Rep had the honour too of playing with one of the greatest players the world has ever seen.
It was great to have played with Johan Cruyff. I learnt a lot from him. We complemented each other perfectly. A classic partnership. It was a great time, a world-class player. I learned a lot from Johan Cruyff, and he from me.
Rep had great times at Ajax, but 9 years after leaving Holland for Valencia, he did the unthinkable and joined his former rivals, Feyenoord.
It wasn't easy. I was considered to be a true Ajax player by the fans. It wasn't my happiest time as a player, to be honest. Feyenoord is a great club, but I was still considered an Ajax player. And it wasn't my best time career-wise, I have to say. They saw me as an Ajax player. They still do.
Ajax players shouldn't play in Rotterdam. Feyenoord players shouldn't play in Amsterdam. It's not a happy marriage.
But Rep wasn't the only Ajax star to court the enemy. Old teammate Johan Cruyff made the move too.
There's this rivalry that you can see if you look at the players that went from Ajax to Feyenoord or from Feyenoord to Ajax. Johan Cruyff went to Feyenoord, for example, just to take revenge on the Ajax board. He then became champion with Feyenoord, which was very bad. But on the other hand, he lost here the classic game between Ajax and Feyenoord in the Olympic Stadium with 8-2. So that, for me, that was one of the bigger classic games in history.
Tegen Dutop. Olsen. Niet buitenspel, nee, want Wijnstekers blijft hangen. Dan is daar Boeven. En die scoort weer. Jongen, dat is al 3-0. En we zijn er 23 minuten bezig.
That year we were champions. And I think Johan Cruyff was playing with us.
Voorin Molenaar. En die mag dan ineens aankoppen. Wat is deze wedstrijd merkwaardig.
Nobody was disappointed because we were champions. Because we have a lot of punch more than Ajax. Dus everybody laughs about it.
Van Basten. Alles winnen ze nu natuurlijk. Ja, ook zo'n goal nog. Ja hoor, ook dat nog. 8-2, Marco van Basten.
At home we beat them with 4-1, and that year we were champion, and that was 83-84. That was a very special year.
With just 2 Dutch titles since 1984, the Rotterdammers have generally lived in the shadow of Amsterdam.
We don't like that Ajax have more success normally than Feyenoord, especially the last years. Okay, the public is still coming. It's the only thing how we can, how we are together.
While some Feyenoord fans can accept the disappointment, at least one of the faithful has decided that enough is enough. Josta Putter had supported Feyenoord since he was a boy.
At some point, you know, I don't know what it is. It's the age, you know, that you think, why am I bothering with this? You know, all of a sudden, you know, of course it's a long history of suffering, mainly, you know, as a Feyenoord fan. You suffer because the referees are no good. You know, all the decisions are in favor of Ajax when it really counts. Feyenoord themselves, it's terrible, you know, it's been terrible for a long time, the way the club is run. It's difficult, you know. I never smoked, but I imagine it's like, you know, quitting the smoking. I stuck for such a long time, probably because Ajax in a way represents a lot of what I don't like in Dutch culture. You know, it's this idea that we know best.
Around 2,000 Feyenoord fans had made the trip to Amsterdam for this derby day. Waiting for them were the Ajax ultras.
First there's a rivalry, then times get tougher. You know, the 80s were different. You know, young people are unemployed, they have no future. You know, the no future generation. You see the violence is connected with real difficulties in life.
These ultras would never get to the Feyenoord fans, who entered the Amsterdam arena through a tunnel from the railway platform. Feyenoord have had their problems with hooligans too over the years, much to the disgust of their genuine supporters.
You always have a little supporters group that is not going for the play, but is going to a city to give the club a bad name.
And as time has gone on, the problem has become worse between Ajax and Feyenoord fans.
Only now, it's become more grim, more extreme. It didn't used to be as bad, but nowadays, well, it's no fun anymore. There are too many things going on. The real supporters shouldn't have to deal with that kind of thing.
Luckily, the police had the situation under control, and the violent minority couldn't harm more than 50,000 people who'd come to the Amsterdam arena to see De Klassieker.
We are just going the other way around to arrive to the places and go not into the crowdy place. It's not safe.
Nevertheless, it was a match that even some of Ajax's most brilliant stars, like Johnny Rep, could get excited about. A deafening Amsterdam arena awaited another Ajax-Feyenoord derby.
It could have gone either way, because right from the start, Feyenoord were the most dangerous team.
Feyenoord was in het begin de gevaarlijkste ploeg.
Charisteas hit the post, so at that point, at 1-0 to Feyenoord, it could have been a completely different match.
Unluckily for the Rotterdam fans, the chance was gone, and it was Ajax who took a crucial lead through Wesley Sneijder.
Then 2-0, and then 3-0, and at that point, the tension was gone. Luckily, 10 minutes before half-time, Charisteas made it 3-1, so there was still something in the match.
But Wesley Sneijder's hat-trick goal put paid to any hopes for the visitors. 4-1 to Ajax. So while Amsterdam celebrated, Rotterdam braced itself for some uncomfortable moments to come.
People ring the supporters club and they ask to me, and I take the phone, and then I'm Amsterdam, I come from Ajax, and you are losers and that and that. But it's the other side around. I never heard them. When we lose, I'm not eating anything, and I don't look football on the telly. That's a very disappointment. Only by Ajax, not with other club, only Ajax.
So this derby day belonged to Ajax. No doubt they would enjoy the party. But the rivalry between the club from Amsterdam and the club from Rotterdam will live on far, far longer.
The greatest victory, every time we win. Make no difference. 1-0, 2-0. When we win, then I'm going home, and I'm always cheered, and I'm eating good.
It's always a fact that these matches are special. And of course there's rivalry, but then again Ajax cannot do without Feyenoord, and Feyenoord cannot do without Ajax. They need each other to have this classical match. So there's rivalry, but then again, most people know you need each other as well.
Thank you for watching. Make sure you don't miss more in the series of football rivalries.
There's spooky goings-on in Haunted tomorrow at 9 and at 10 with incredible footage. It's world's most heroic firefighters. And later at 11, the ice truck killer better watch out. Deborah's out to get her guy in Dexter.